So do you think China can do it by 2050?
I'm not positive that China can do it by 2050, but I guess most of the world was not positive that China could eradicate poverty by 2020, and it succeeded in doing so.
Hello and welcome to the special edition of The Talk. Today we're on the sidelines of a poverty alleviation forum in southwest China's Yunnan province. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Robert Walker, who is a professor of sociology at Beijing Normal University. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to do so.
So this year is basically a special year where China has hit its target to eliminate abject poverty. So how do you think China's model can be applied elsewhere in the world?
I think in a number of ways. I think one has to acknowledge, first of all, that it's an incredible achievement to eradicate poverty. But the things that we can learn are, I guess, the recognition that if you set a target and focus people's attention, that builds a possibility of doing something about it. We have to acknowledge that there's been leadership from the top. There have been people making sure that the statements that are made at the centre are delivered on the ground. We can learn about the mechanisms for doing that. But I also think there's an acknowledgement that poverty is quite a complex issue, that it needs different kinds of policy. And one of the things you've seen China do pretty well is to implement policies at different levels of government. So at national government, you've certainly got to focus on economic growth. And we can see how fast China has grown and continues to grow. At provincial level, there's a recognition that it's not individuals who are at fault. You lack infrastructure. If you can't deliver goods to market because there isn't a road, how can you become prosperous? At the level of the town or county, thinking about human capital development, pompous words for saying, what skills have we got, skills that we need for a modern economy? And I guess at the level of the village and the township also, the notion that some people can't work for a whole series of reasons, and therefore to put in place relatively comprehensive social assistance schemes to fulfill that particular need.
So we are talking about China's achievements, how it's brought millions of people out of poverty. Well, the question I have is, how do you stop people falling back into poverty? What do you think are the challenges that lie ahead for China in the years to come?
Well, China is already beginning to address that issue. It's come up with a term which is very difficult in English, which is rural revitalisation, which is basically a strategy which is designed to prevent people returning to poverty. So we begin to think about what China looks like in the future. China's going for a middle-income country. It has aspirations for shared prosperity. To achieve that tends to change your focus from the bottom to thinking about society as a whole. It's about reducing inequality. It's building mechanisms that facilitate people to climb up the social ladder. Rural revitalisation is beginning to do that. Its long-term goal is incredibly ambitious. It's to bring together the living standards of people in rural areas and make them the same as urban. And that's a goal that's put in place for 2050. It's a goal which, if China achieves it, will be a global first, the first time in human history that we've ever brought together living standards in urban and rural areas. And my personal opinion is, if any country can do it, it's China that can do it. And the logic of that is that leaving it to the market will concentrate resources in cities, because cities benefit from the economies of scale, from large markets close at hand, skills coming together. But China can argue against that and say there's a bigger goal. It's a goal about social responsibility. It's a goal about collective understanding. It's a goal which says we need to invest in rural areas as well.
So you propose the idea of a multidimensional poverty, which you have said is more than just about the lack of income. So what do you think that needs to be taken into account when you are making policies, I guess especially in China?
I don't think it's really true that I propose poverty is multidimensional. I think we've always known it's multidimensional, but it's easier to measure if you focus on income. China's already, in some sense, begun to think about the characteristics of poverty in a multidimensional way. But I think if you listen to people in China and you listen to people globally who are themselves experiencing poverty, they take the attention away from the lack of physical things and focus on some of the relational components of poverty and some of the personal and emotional components, because that's what they live with on a day-to-day basis. So the way that we think about poverty, the way that we look at somebody who's poor, the way that we talk about them and talk to them is part of the experience of poverty. Now, that leads to social exclusion. People in poverty find it difficult even to take part in family gatherings. They can't afford to buy the little red packet. And so they are not wanted, they're not loved, they're not respected within the family. And that hurts. But it's not just at a personal level. In China, people think more about helplessness, that there is no one they can turn to. Whatever they say, the world doesn't change. So that notion of being without power, that people don't ask and don't consult, they do things to us rather than engaging with us and asking, what can we do that will really help? And so we need, as we design policies, to think about each of these dimensions. China is a people-centred society. Policy addressing poverty alleviation is people-centred. There's a notion of what a social consultative democracy would look like. Those are big words in English and they're strict translations of the Chinese. But what does that mean in practice, and how do we better engage people in the design of policies to support them? The bottom line about poverty is it's not just individuals who can get themselves out of poverty. It's a collective venture. You and I are partly responsible for the poverty that other people suffer. It's our responsibility as much as theirs. And that's where China's socialist perspective opens up enormous opportunities. And again, as we move forward into rural revitalisation, to think about how China can capitalise on that understanding will be something that could be world leading.
So it's much more about a collective effort, as you are saying.
Exactly right. And China is in a unique position of being able to use its power to facilitate that collective effort.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you.